Okay, welcome, folks. Welcome to the Great Lakes ROTA-RC presentation on building impactful programs using logic model framework for program design and outcome measurement. This webinar is being hosted by the Great Lakes ROTA-RC Regional Partner, UW-Madison Division of Extension. Woo, my home. I'll be your host, Jen Park-Maroc. I am the PI on this project. Before we get to our presentation, we have a few quick housekeeping items to address. First is our funding announcement. We need to acknowledge our funder and funding activity. The Great Lakes ROTA-RC is funded by the Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, to provide training and technical assistance to rural communities within the Great Lakes. Collaboratively, we develop and strengthen community capacity to prevent, treat, and support recovery for opioid use disorder and other mental health conditions and substance use disorders. Through cooperative extension state programs, we employ evidence-based emerging practices and provide virtual or on-demand education for rural community members regarding substance use education and other relevant topics in mental health and substance use disorders. In communities with Indigenous populations, the project co-creates culturally responsive holistic health and resources. We also provide evidence-based resources and research, as well as technical outreach to professionals working in and with rural communities. We invite you to learn more of the Great Lakes Rural Opioid Technical Assistance Regional Center with its resources and partners by participating in our grant projects. Our website is, our website has all these resources, such as previously recorded webinars, newsletter articles, community toolkit and resources and funding announcements. We also invite you and encourage to enjoy our e-newsletter distribution. Once a month, we will provide regional content as well as national resources. Every other week, we also provide available training updates hosted by the Great Lakes ROTA-RC partners, as well as regional and national professional development opportunities. The last bit of information I want to talk to you as we prepare to listen and engage in this content. Let's take a moment to promote the use of affirming first-person language when discussing behavioral health disorders. As we create an environment of learning together, let us create a learning space that is welcoming and safe for everyone. As a virtual learning community, we ask that all participants support non-stigmatizing, recovery-oriented language that can help reduce negative bias and promote engagement. We invite your active participation from whatever space you are joining us today, and we welcome you formally into the Great Lakes ROTA-RC virtual learning community. This morning, we have Paul Roback. He's a professor and community development educator in Ozaukee County, Wisconsin, a Division of Extension affiliate, Center for Community and Nonprofit Studies, School of Human Ecology. Boy, Paul, you have a lot of affiliations. For over 22 years, Paul has strived to connect individuals and communities to the University of Wisconsin. As a county-based community development educator for the UW-Madison's Division of Extension, he has provided organizational development programming that has built the capacity of over 100 nonprofits, community organizations, coalitions, local governments, and school districts. And so now I will stop sharing. Paul, I will allow you to share your screen.
Thanks, Jen, for that introduction. Let's see here. There we go. Please excuse me as I kind of rearrange my screen again. All right, Jen, can you see the whole slide now?
Yes, totally can. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone, as I worked through that. Well, good morning. I think everyone's still in morning. Maybe there's a few afternooners somewhere, but I'm pleased to be able to present to you today. As Jen mentioned, I've been with UW-Madison's Division of Extension now. Next week will be my 23rd anniversary. So um, I've been very fortunate to uh, work for the same organization for a long period of time. And if you joined early, you heard that I guess I like stability. I grew up in the Milwaukee area, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I went to school here, and I still work in the region. I'm currently a community development educator, one county north of Milwaukee in Ozaukee County, and I primarily provide organizational development programming to local governments and nonprofits. So I do a lot of strategic planning, staff development, board development, those type of activities. Uh, and as Jen mentioned, I've worked with a lot of organizations over the years, and I can confidently say that I've strengthened over 100 of them, and I've transformed organizational culture through the staff development workshops, primarily using the Real Colors curriculum. And then I've engaged local elected officials in public policy and analysis. So I start off this way because um, it shows the benefits of program planning and outcome evaluation. I can confidently say that I've strengthened over 100 organizations because I've planned and evaluated the short and long-term outcomes of those programs. And so I will share today how I go about doing that. So it's really thinking through how do we know our programs work, whether or not in your extension or in other settings as well, because I know that we have a broad audience today, not just in the university settings. Of course, a lot of my examples are going to be pulling from my work in extension and specifically in community development as well. But the basic frameworks and the tools that I share can easily be adapted and used in lots of different settings and sectors. Our learning outcomes today, we're going to discuss why logic models are used. I'm really going to focus in on what I call the three main components of the logic model: the inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And I like to focus on those three because I find that oftentimes those are the three that people may get confused on or may use interchangeably or may struggle with trying to define what an output and an outcome is for their program that they're designing and or implementing. And the back half of this presentation is really going to learn some evaluation practices that I've used and that are pretty interchangeable for other programs as well. So when we look at our communities that we're serving, we're usually we see an issue, right, in the community, and we want to address that issue that we see, whether or not it's increasing food security for families. Maybe you want to improve water quality. Maybe you want to recruit more volunteers, promote positive youth development. So you see issues in the community, kind of aiming for these goals to address those issues. And so oftentimes we find ourselves, okay, we're going to just start doing a bunch of things, right, to improve the situation. So we're going to start providing programs. Maybe if we want to increase food security, we're going to teach gardening at schools. Oftentimes, though, we don't know what's happening in between this. Is what we're doing really addressing the needs that we've identified in the community? And how do you figure that out? Oftentimes, it's this confusing mess, this knotted ball of strings. And it's sometimes hard to understand or pull apart and see exactly which thread is connecting what we're doing to what we're aiming for. So a logic model, or this theory of change, is really helpful to help us unsnarl and articulate what we're doing and how we think about how it's going to work or impact the communities that we serve. It's a visual framework for illustrating how those activities do connect with the intended outcomes. But I always like to caution that it doesn't need to be when you're designing logic model, it doesn't have to provide definitive proof at the front end, right? Because it's a program theory. It's a program logic. You're making some guesses. There's assumptions that get built in the model. And I really like this quote from MQ Patton, who is a consultant, organizational development consultant in, I think, primarily Minnesota. Did his PhD work in Wisconsin, so good, another Midwest person, and he was also president of the American Evaluation Association. So he has some authority here, and I really like about it is that our aim is to be more modest, reasonable estimations of the likelihood that particular activities have contributed in concrete ways to observed effects. So the emphasis is on the word reasonable, not definitive conclusions, not absolute proof. So Jen, can you help me monitor the chat? Someone's asking if the slides will be shared.
Yes, the slides will definitely be shared.
Great, thanks. So really, a logic model is a roadmap, right? It's going to help us see visually and plan for where we are today to where we want to go in the future. So what's the situation today, as well as what the situation we hope will be like at a future time. It shows the logical relationships again between the resources that we're investing and the activities that we're doing, and hopefully the intended changes and results that we want to see. And it's really used for program planning, evaluation, and also you can be using it for program management. Sometimes I think some of our colleagues will use a logic model just in the planning phase and never look at it again, or they'll only use it maybe at the end. It's like, oh, we got a report on this grant, so let's go back to that logic model we developed. Did we actually do what we say we're going to do? And did we actually evaluate based on the outcomes that we were trying to measure at the beginning of this? But really also using the logic model as program management, meaning referencing as not only in the planning phase, in the development phase, but also in the implementation phase, and pausing and reflecting throughout the process and seeing what adjustments that need to be made. And I'll be sharing more specific examples of that coming up shortly. I don't like to go into, or I don't want to go into logic model discussions with our eyes closed. It's not the perfect tool for every situation, right? So there are critics of the logic model that it's too simplistic, it's too rigid, because when you see the model, it looks very structured and that you can't change anything about it. And oftentimes the societal issues that we're trying to address are very challenging. And it often takes multiple agencies, multiple interventions, multiple programs to really see measurable change in the community. And some critics say that the logic model doesn't necessarily lend itself well to that type of intervention and trying to measure from multiple agencies. But the proponents of it, those that like it and use it, say, I mean, the beauty is in the simplicity, that it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. It's sometimes good for everybody to be on the same page, right? And have a simplistic tool that everybody can use and reference. And it can be a starting point for more complex evaluations. So what does a basic logic model look like? So again, I said, I'm going to focus on the main three components, at least the main three for me are inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So what are we investing? What resources are we going to use? Outputs, what are we going to do with those resources? And then finally, those outcomes or the impact, what are the results that we hope to see from applying those resources? So as an example, I think almost all of us have had a headache at some point, right? So you have a headache and you want to solve that issue that you're experiencing. So the inputs in this situation is getting some Tylenol, aspirin, Advil, whatever it is. So getting some pills, medication over the counter to help. What are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to take it, right? So that's your output. And then the outcome that you're measuring for yourself is whether or not you're feeling better afterwards. So very simplistic view of the logic model: inputs, outputs, and then outcomes. Okay, this is where it gets a little more complicated, right? So go from simplistic to a little more complicated. This is an example of a logic model. There's lots of variations out there. They come all different shapes and sizes. They can be uh, in a table form. They can have boxes or circles or other shapes. There's been cultural adaptations of the logic model. Um, Sometimes they're visually less linear than this. I'm using this one today. This version is because this is the one that we use at UW-Madison, and we've been using it for a long time. So I started an extension in 2001, and it predates my career in extension, and it really hasn't changed much since then. And it's also been widely used worldwide. And I can verify that because the very first American Evaluation Association conference I went to a couple breakout sessions with international presenters, and they referenced the UW-Madison extension, a logic model. Is it perfect? No, no tool or visual is ever perfect, but it is useful, and it's been widely used and adapted. So I'm going to start at the left side of the logic model. I'm going to zoom in there. So starting off with the situation, that's your observations. What are you seeing out in the community? So doing those needs assessments, stakeholder engagement. Sometimes it's also doing a lot of data hunting, either collecting your own data or going to other sources of data to help you understand what's going on in the community, and what's going on related to the issue that you're trying to solve. It would be nice if we had all the resources we we needed to resolve every issue, but that's not reality, right? So we have to kind of filter that situation with some priorities. So every organization has a mission and vision, and there's local dynamics, and there's collaborators, and there's mandates. So there's also competitors. What other organizations or individuals might be doing to address the issue? So it's good to filter through that situation, that needs assessment, with the priorities that are with your organization and the community that you're serving. Then we get to the inputs. What are we investing? Staff, time, volunteers, technology, materials, and then start thinking through the outputs. What type of activities are we going to do? What's the best way to start to move the needle to address this issue? Is it conducting in-person workshops? Is it developing a curriculum and training people? Is it facilitating something in the community conversations, or delivering direct services? And then also with the outputs, thinking through, who are you trying to reach? Who are going to be the participants of this? With this comes some assumptions, right? So when you're thinking through like inputs to address outputs, and in order to implement outputs, it's like, well, when we were planning this in the logic model, we made the assumption that we had enough staff to address the issue, or we had enough money, financial resources to address the issue, or we had the right technology. And then later on in the process, you find out you didn't, or maybe that as a result of the work you're doing, you're actually able to obtain more funding than you thought, because what you're working on is really resonating with donors or grants funders. So there are assumptions that go into this process that you need to think through and just be aware of as you're moving forward in the planning. The right side of the logic model is the outcomes, the impact. In my early extension career, I spent a lot of time on the left side. I'm a little bit more the data kind of guy that likes to think through and I need more data. I really need to understand the situation. Also, I think it helps justify my position and why extension is needed in the community. And oftentimes, especially early in my career, I didn't think as much about the outcomes, both short and long term. And as time went on, I really learn the value of thinking through those outcomes in the program planning, being more deliberate about it, as well as implementation and evaluation, helping using evaluation to think through outcomes better. And am I measuring the right outcomes to begin with? And then also communicating to stakeholders and funders. And lastly, trying to understand whether or not the resources that we're using are actually impacting the communities we serve. So with outcomes, the short term is that kind of like that direct intervention, that direct thing you're doing. So, if you're providing a workshop and you're trying to teach people, what are they learning? What knowledge are they gaining? The medium term is then what are they going to do as a result of that new knowledge gained? Are they going to change their behavior? Are they going to make more informed decisions or change public policy? And that longer term is really kind of that grandiose idea that we have is like, oh, we've changed something in society or the environment or the economy because of the programs that we're doing. Now, below this outcome area, you'll see external factors, right? And this is where I think a lot of people get hung up in thinking through like, well, of course we want to go to this end result and take credit, but the further you move out and the longer the time is, the chances are there's more external factors, things that are happening in the community besides what you're doing that may impact those societal conditions. So if you are working in a community in maybe a specific zip code or township, and you're trying to address hunger and nutrition, and you start by doing some workshops, building skills, changing people's behaviors and practices, and maybe there's some different policies that have changed with the local community or the state to increase access to healthy food options or better or farm fresh foods in schools. And over time, maybe 5-10 years, because it takes a while for health changes to occur, that you're able to say, hey, the community is showing improvement in the measures that we're looking for improved health. But you may not be the only one addressing this, right? The school district might be doing something. There might be nonprofits out there doing something as well. So the further you go out, the more these external organizations and factors may be playing a role in those longer term outcomes. Now, what you'll see in some of my programmatic examples is that you can use what we often like to refer to as like a chain of outcomes, that you can measure your the short-term outcomes and measure your specific programming intervention with the medium-term outcomes, and then see how it connects to the longer-term outcomes and your role in it. So being able to take credit for what you're doing and being clear on that helps throughout the process. And again, I'll show an example of that when I get to the evaluation section. And the last thing about this slide I want to point out is that little arrow in the top right that kind of circles back. And when I first started using the logic model, I missed that arrow because it's not very big, and I didn't really understand necessarily what it means. What it means is that what you're learning from your outcome measurement helps inform the programs that you're delivering, right? So if you're doing short-term outcome measurement on the workshops that you're doing, you're learning things. Is this the way we're delivering this information? Are people receptive to it? Excuse me. Are they understanding it? Is it clear to them? And if it's not, you make adjustments, right? So you don't just keep doing the same thing. You learn from it and you change and adapt. Same thing with the medium-term outcomes. So if decision makers haven't changed their decisions that they're making or changed policies, then you go back and go, okay, at this point, we need to go back and rethink through our inputs and outputs and how they may then impact those longer medium-term and longer-term outcomes. When I first started years ago, someone once said to me, be outcome-driven, not activity-driven. And so it's a good reminder to think through, um, we can spin our wheels a lot with activities. We can say, oh, we just need to do more workshops. We need to reach more people. We need to, have this amazing, I don't know, social media presence that is really going to reach everybody that we're trying to intend. Well, those are all good things to do. But, if you're just constantly spinning your wheels on those things and not thinking through, well, why are you trying to increase your social media presence? Is it really going to change the behavior or increase the knowledge that you're looking for? So always reflecting back to our activities, our inputs and outputs really aligning with the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve in the community. So with that, I'll take a moment to breathe. I presented a lot to you, give you a moment to think and process. Before we jump into a quiz, are there any questions about the logic model anyone wants to put in the chat or so feel free to do that throughout the presentation. I can always loop back and answer those. Outcomes versus impacts. I think they're the same. What do you think, Jen?
I think I do think they're the same. I mean, it all depends on how you define things, right? Like an impact, your outcome can be the impact. I don't really know.
Yeah. It's a good question. Got stumped right away on the first one. Thanks. Sure. Yeah, I've always kind of uh, use the terms interchangeably, and sometimes those terms resonate with individuals differently. So when I'm working more in my extension circles, I'm talking a lot more about outcomes. But when I'm reporting out to stakeholders and funding partners, I use the term impact a lot more. So what impact are we making in the community? Because that term seems to resonate more with them than the term outcome. All right, so quiz time. Uh, gonna have a uh, uh, can't impact affect the outcome. Yeah. I mean, uh, if you're looking at impact on the individual level, um, and the impacts people are experiencing, uh, it would impact the outcome, and it could also impact then how you measure that outcome. So quiz time, 20 neighborhood residents participated in 3 one-hour workshops on starting a community garden. Do we think this is an input, output, short-term outcome, medium-term, or long-term outcome? And you can put it in the chat. So lots of people saying input. So it's more of an output because it's something that you're doing. So if we were talking about staff or educators and those type of resources, then it would be more of an input. An output is actually an activity, right? Conducting a workshop. And I could be an outcome if you were saying that, oh, the outcome of a work is that we're going to do a workshop, but it's not. So number of workshops would actually be an output as well. So you'd really want to look at outcome as more of what did they learn or do as a result of attending the workshop. The next item is after 4 years of community garden use, neighborhood residents increased their consumption of fresh produce, leading to a decrease in their body mass index. So would this be an input, output, or a short, medium, or long-term outcome? Yeah, so a lot of people are seeing medium to longer term outcome, and that I would agree with that as well. So it all depends on kind of the um, scope of the project. So for this example, I'm saying it's longer term. And the reason why I'm saying it's longer term because it's 4 years. And in this day and age, it seems like 4 years is a long time, right? And it's resulting in a pretty significant change in individuals. So it's beyond that they learn something, beyond that they change their behavior. Maybe they're eating healthier and being more physically active. You're actually seeing a change in the individuals, um, including a decrease in their body mass index. And I would say there really isn't sometimes um, exact answer, right? So depending on what your module looks like, it could be considered a medium-term outcome if you were looking for some other longer-term um, outcome as a result of the program that you're delivering. To safely store garden tools for proposed new community garden, a 6-foot by 6-foot storage shed needs to be constructed. You think it's an input, output, or a short, medium, or long-term outcome? Ah, the input people. There we go. Yeah, because it's a resource. So resources can be staff, time, money, tools, buildings. So in this example, it is an input. So here we go. After attending 3 1-hour workshops, 18 out of the 20 participants indicated that they increased their gardening knowledge. Is this an input, output, or short, medium, or long-term outcome? So got a lot of short and medium term outcomes, and it could be either depending on what your full logic model looks like. So for my example, I'm saying it's a short term because um, we've delivered a workshop, which is the output, and uh, at the end of the workshop, we're doing an evaluation, and 18 um, out of 20 increased their knowledge. So they gained knowledge as a result of attending the workshop. As a result of attending a community gardening workshops, 15 out of 20 participants planted and harvested 100 pounds of produce. So is this an input, output, short, medium, or longer term outcome? So not only did they attend and learn something, but now they're actually doing something as a result. So medium term outcome is how I would frame it based on logic model that I was thinking through. Although some colleagues in extension have pointed out it could be considered an output as well if the actual growing of the food is considered participation in what we're doing. So if that was actually thought through in that more on the input side of participation and activities, then more towards the output would be more towards an output instead of an outcome. But when I was thinking through this, I was thinking more of a medium-term outcome because people are applying their knowledge and actually using that knowledge to plant and harvest produce. So I hope the quiz kind of helped a little bit increase your knowledge and awareness of the logic model and the differences between the inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So how do I put this into practice? So I mentioned at the beginning that I do organizational development work and extension. That's what the OD on this slide means on the left corner. And so I work with nonprofits primarily and local governments trying to build their organizational capacity through the programmings that I provide: strategic planning, organizational development, board development, staff development, And doing all that, I'm also doing some human and social capital building as well. And I'm doing all this work because I want to see something improve in the communities. I want to actually help strengthen these organizations so that they're more successful in fulfilling their missions and achieving their visions, right? So I'm not providing direct work. I'm not working directly with clients as far as like helping people find permanent housing or um, whereas I'm actually working with the organizations that are helping people find permanent housing. So being aware of what your role is and what you're trying to achieve also helps think through your theory change and program logic and the logic model. So how do I know that anything that I'm doing is actually improving the community situation and strengthening these organizations? And thinking through my own project logic model um, leads me to think through evaluating my programs. So we're going to kind of transition now from program planning to the actual some evaluation tools and strategies and helping program design and implementation. Cookie Monster, right? Who thought you'd see Cookie Monster this morning? So this is a fun way to reflect on evaluation. Sometimes I think colleagues get bogged down. I think evaluations have to be this big process and is scary and intimidating, where you can really break down evaluation to simple components that are less intimidating and kind of build from there. So when you're standing in a grocery store aisle, one of those big stores, we have like 100 different chocolate chip cookies to look at. What questions need answered in order to make an informed decision when purchasing a package of chocolate chip cookies? So, what criteria do you use? And you can just use uh, um, the chat to put in things you would think through in selecting a package of chocolate chip cookies in the grocery store aisle. See, Cookie Monster wasn't on someone's bingo card this morning. Good to know. Thanks. Price, yeah. Ooey gooey, melted chocolate chips. How fresh are they? Soft, crunchy taste, color, the ingredients, the brand, right? Brands. Sometimes we have brand loyalty. Does it contain nuts? Yeah, I got to look at the contents, make sure there's no potential allergy issues. Calories. Yeah. So all great criteria to think through as we're making a decision on what package of chocolate chip cookies to purchase. And it turns out, as you've guessed, we're making these decisions every day, all the time about things. And you can use a basic scoring rubric to start to evaluate this decision-making process and help make an informed decision on what type of chocolate chip cookie to purchase. So the criteria that I'm going to use for this example is number of chocolate chips. Are there going to be a lot or a little? Texture, is it going to be crispy or hard? And taste. And I'm going to score that from poor to delicious. And filling in this scoring rubric, you can see that for chocolate chips, for me, it's poor if I can't see any in the cookie. And it's delicious if there's more chocolate chips than I can count, right? You can see chocolate chips on the front side, the back side, all around the chocolate chip cookie. The texture, is it really hard? I don't like hard, crisp cookies. I like the soft, chewy, right out of the oven type for myself. Taste. Tastes like a dog biscuit, or does it taste like something that my grandma used to make for me? So you could have what I call more fun evaluation tools like this. Oftentimes in extension circles, our 4-H educators are way more adaptive and creative in their evaluation approaches than I tend to be. And then also you can transition a concept like this into probably what some would consider a more traditional um, rubric model where you're using actual numbers, right? Or you can just transition it to numbers to help you actually then score the evaluation, tabulate the evaluation. So transitioning that example then into my programming and extension in working with nonprofit organizations, every time I facilitate for a group and provide education and training, I use evaluations with Likert scale. So I measure, does creating a vision statement help clearly define the direction of their organization? Do they strongly agree with that, or do they strongly agree? Do they disagree, or do they strongly agree on that statement? And I do that during the facilitation workshops throughout the process I'm doing with it. So then the evaluation I can also use that learning for myself to then adapt future trainings and workshops with the organization that I'm working with, as well as future organizations that I'll be working with down the road as well. This is the evaluation tool that I use. Pretty basic. I'm sure most people have seen evaluations structured very similarly. Things that I like to point out on this is that I like to provide instructions verbally when I pass out my evaluations. I like to, first of all, tell people why we're evaluating. We're evaluating today because, hey, we want to see, we want to measure the outcomes of what we've done together, track to see how our progress is going. Are we all on the same page? Do we need to make adjustments? Also, I've got funding partners to report to, the university and the county I work in. So this is a way that I can measure and report back to them. And I find that providing that information about why we're evaluating helps people buy into actually completing the evaluation tool. Two, I also like to build evaluation into the timeline for the program. So my agendas always have 5 minutes at the end for evaluation. How many times have you been to a workshop that, the workshop goes till 7 p.m. and at 7:05 they're asking you to complete an evaluation? Yeah, everyone's checked out already at that point, and so your response rates goes way down. And then I also like to use this yellow sheet of paper for all my evaluations because it kind of helps, it stands out and it kind of helps train people to go, oh yeah, here comes that yellow sheet of paper again. It's going to be evaluation. Personally, I like to evaluate in person. I find that participation goes way up if it's in person versus, oh, a couple days later, I'll send them an email with an evaluation survey link. Then I find participation goes much further down. How do I use that type of evaluation? That's measuring that short term, right? Outcomes. It's just measuring, I did a workshop, they learned something or they agreed with what we were doing or disagreed with it. That information I report monthly to our county board here in Ozaukee County and also to our state reporting system to the university. And so I briefly explain, what I did. Hey, this nonprofit Family Promise contacted me. What did we do together? Those are the outputs. Hey, to achieve their objectives, we did a couple workshops here. Did two, in fact, and there were 17 board members and staff members that participated. This is what we did. And then that last paragraph is outcomes that I'm measuring. They're all short-term outcomes here. Out of the 17 that participated in the workshop, 13 completed the evaluation. So pretty good response rate. A couple of people had to leave early and, other things that go on as always. And then I always like to include both the quantitative and qualitative evaluation in there. So I have both the numbers, and then I have some qualitative statements in there, direct participant feedback or comments, including those where, because I know that reporting out to all these different partners, they all look at information differently, and some are more receptive to the number, some are more receptive to the statements. So longer term, how do I measure these outcomes longer term? And there's lots of ways to do this. And the way I chose is that at the end of the year, I send out an evaluation with the organizations that I worked with. And those organizations have usually been engaged. There's usually 3 to 12 months gap between my engagement and when I'm evaluating from them. So I don't do a longer term evaluation, of course, right after, like within a couple of weeks. I do it a little bit longer. And ideally, it'd be nice if I sent out that evaluation, that longer term evaluation consistently with each organization. Like, hey, 6 months after I'm done with that organization, I'm going to send them a longer term evaluation. I tried doing that at first and I wasn't disciplined enough to send it out 6 months after. Even though I had reminders, I get distracted or busy. I just found for me it was easier to implement that, hey, at the end of the year, I know I need to do this. So I'm going to measure at one time for myself. Um, is there a right or wrong answer in doing that? Not really. As long as you're clear in how, when you're communicating out, how that data was collected and kind of the methodology of why you went about collecting the data that way. So my end of year evaluations ask questions like, as a result of working with Paul and Paul's facilitation, has your organization been strengthened? Is it more strategic in fulfilling its mission? And has your organization increased its capacity to address communities' issues and opportunities? And you can see that I've had really good results, that most have agreed or strongly agreed with those statements, and nobody has strongly disagreed with them. I've also had a pretty good response rate, 86%, by doing this. So this is rolling data. Again, I've been collecting this information at the end of each year for 9 years. Hey, that's exciting. This is going to be 10-year anniversary of collecting this data. These milestones. Data geeks get excited, right? So this is how I'm able to show, in the beginning when I was explaining my program logic theory of what am I doing, and then I'm hopefully going to see something change in the community. This is where I'm getting to being able to show those change of outcomes. Excuse me. So I can now measure, like in the short term, I measured, did they learn something? Now I'm seeing, did they actually apply it? Do they think that they've been strengthened? And I can't say that I've directly strengthened the community, but I think through my work and through this evaluation, I can say that I've strengthened the capacity of the organizations that are strengthening the community that they're serving. So I'm being a little more precise here in what my role is and what that longer term outcome is. So my longer term outcome isn't that the community is necessarily changed, although it's kind of maybe inferred a little bit with that last question there. I'm really carving out my niche of like, I'm strengthening this organization so that they're more strategic in addressing these issues. Because again, I don't address those issues directly myself. I don't help homeless individuals find permanent housing, right? I work with the organization that does that. Again, how do I use this information? For those that joined the session earlier today, or before we officially started, I mentioned that I moved counties. I moved from one county in Wisconsin to another. And as I introduced myself to my new oversight committee, I shared this flyer with them showing, what do I do, kind of the outputs, and as well as the outcomes on the bottom here. This is the results of the work that I'm doing, how I'm measuring it, and even with 5 county board supervisors, that sometimes you wonder, are they really engaged? Are they really paying attention? It turns out at least one of them was. He's like, wow, that's really impressive, that impact that you're showing there on the bottom. We're excited that you're here and that we're hoping to achieve the same outcomes moving forward. In extension, you can take this evaluation data and, just file it away or write a journal article on it. I actually shared it with the local media who then interviewed the nonprofits I was working with and got their take on the work that I'm doing with them and the impacts we're having in the community. And at the very end, they actually cited my report. So it doesn't have to necessarily go in a vacuum. You can communicate and get that message out there to the general public. How am I doing in time, Jen?
You have 7 minutes. We do have a question in
Great.
the chat whenever you're ready.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just briefly share this and I'll get to the question. Thanks. So I just want to share just another quick example, Real Colors. It's like Myers-Briggs. It's a personality assessment tool. I use it for staff development trainings. It's a national curriculum. Um, I've been using it, co-teaching it with a colleague of mine. We've done a lot of workshops with a lot of participants. You can see it here on the slide. When we went to starting measuring the outcomes of the program, back when we started providing the program, the Real Colors folks didn't have an evaluation tool. So we created our own based on how they were marketing and promoting their program. So if you went to their website, they said, hey, if you participate in Real Colors, you'll recognize your strengths and the strengths in others and so forth. So we're like, hey, that'd be a great items to measure in our evaluation. So we started to do that in all the workshops we're doing, standard evaluation. You can see the results there. To get that longer term outcome measurement, we did a lot of workshops for the county that we were working in, Washington County. Over 500 participants of 500 county employees went through the program. We went to the county administrator. We asked them, how has this program helped shift or change the culture of Ozaukee County government or Washington County government? And this is the statement that he shared with us. And then an extension, you can write journal articles based on the programs and evaluations that we're using, created a poster that we shared at national and state conferences as well. All right, so the intent there was I was showing you the connections, the linkages between the work that I'm doing and the success that we're having out in the community. So with that, I'll go to the question, how do you encourage and support community-based organizations to conduct evaluations and stick with the process? It seems programs and direct services always take precedence, which makes sense, but evaluation is vital. Yeah, I'm just reflecting a little bit on the question there. So I'm kind of in a unique position that I work with a lot of these community supporting organizations, and a lot of them come to me for strategic planning, and we develop a strategic plan, and we get to what I call action planning. Okay, now that you have your prioritized goals, now you need to come up with your activities, what you're going to do with what resources, and thinking through then what outcomes are you trying to achieve as well, and then thinking through, okay, how are we going to measure the success of the strategic plan and our activities to report to our funders, and encouraging them at that point. I'm like, okay, if you want to move the needle, and if you want to show success and demonstrate the continued need for the programs, you need to measure outcomes as well as outputs. So like, no, it's great that you reached 100 more clients in the previous year. But did that result in any change? So then thinking through the evaluation tools, and both in the short term, if they're doing a workshop or you're doing a counseling session, having an evaluation there to measure outcomes so you can get the short term, but then thinking through strategies, and it's going to be a wide variety of strategies to think through on depending on who you're working with, how you're engaged in longer term. Some populations are really hard, as you probably know, are really hard to track as you're moving forward. They're transient, or they're maybe unhoused and or may not have permanent addresses, or their communication styles and preferences and modes change all the time. So it's really thinking through with the organizations how best to start to make those longer term connections with the individuals.
So there's another question, which I'm not sure we're going to have time to answer, but as we work in this area of the opioid epidemic, what are some ideas regarding logic models specific to this work? I think personally, we should think about what can support prevention or recovery. Think about the outcomes of prevention and recovery and treatment. And I'm not, uh, it's funny because this is the area that I also work in. So I can't really think about how it's different than how what Paul just presented. However, if you want to work through a logic model, the person who asked that question, please contact me at jenniferpark@wisc.edu. And I just put my email in the chat and I can help you think about it offline. But I because only because this is, I think about logic models in this work. I can't think of it. I can't see how it's different because it's something that I always think about. But Amy said she did that with data related to the opioid crisis to build a data dashboard. No. Sorry, Paul, you have one last slide.
Yeah, so the last slide here is obviously it's hard to retain all this information in 1 hour, right? So UW-Madison Extension, Division Extension, we have this website for logic models. It's got the model in there. It's self-paced, it's free. You can these 7 essentially chapters, you can jump in at any one of those. They have sub-chapters, you can learn. If there's an area of the logic model that you're struggling with more, maybe the difference between medium and longer term outcomes, you can drill down and spend more time focusing on that as well. So a free resource, right? Who doesn't like that? That's available to anyone that goes to that website. Oh, so I'll just leave that up there a little bit longer. So if you want to jot that down. So thanks for your time today. I enjoy sharing these stories and sharing the benefits and the usage of the logic model and some evaluation practices that I've implemented over the years for my programming.
I also included our evaluation link in the chat. If y'all can fill out the evaluation link, that would be super awesome. How do you select the work that you do? Do community organizations reach out to you directly? How do you decide what to do?
Yeah, I'm given a pretty long leash, which is nice, by both Extension and Ozaki County. So it's usually word of mouth or me trying to find the right connections in the community so that organizations are aware of my resources. I do have some parameters because there's a ton of organizations out there, right? So oftentimes, like if it's a bigger organization like a school district, I may help one area of their strategic planning, but they usually have resources to hire a consultant. I also am cautious around religious organizations because there's so many congregations, and a lot of them also have resources for strategic planning. And and lastly, church politics. Sometimes they get a little messy. So, however, if it's a bunch of religious congregations coming together to do something together, then I find myself facilitating those quite a bit as well. So, you know, getting the word out there, finding those right key contacts in the community, help them more. The other challenge in Wisconsin is that each of our programs are community need based. So there isn't exactly one of my positions in all 72 of Wisconsin counties. But we do have a fair number of community development educators, and then a good number of those are doing the organizational development work.
I'm gonna stop recording. Just wanna